This video was made possible through the support of my patrons. So today, we do something a little bit different. A lot of the content on this channel often has to do with the narrative, thematic and character work that goes on in Doctor Who, but in recent times I have found myself naturally a bit more drawn to the behind the scenes of the programme and the directors who try to inject their own sensibilities into what is ultimately a show that doesn't really belong to them. TV is a different animal to film in that the tone, style and sensibilities are set by the showrunner and the producers, and the directors are mainly there to fulfill that vision and bring those scripts to life. As a result, it can often be hard to find directors whose work really stands above the rest on this show, and not just because its budget can be pretty small, but you still have your great directors of the classic series like Waris Hussein, Christopher Barry, David Maloney, Alan Waring and Graham Harper, as well as your standouts of the revived series like A. Ross Lynn, Joe Ahern, Nick Hurren and Graham Harper. I think Doctor Who as a family show on the BBC with influence is a great platform to get a generation of new directors, writers, camera operators, makeup artists, set designers, whatever, into the industry and be a gateway into it. It's how I got into the industry. My first memory and recollection of wanting to work in the arts was watching Doctor Who Confidential for the End of the World. So with that in mind, I wanted to make a video or a video series that is an extension of that, but for directing, talking about the camera tricks, shots and the editing choices that happen to make a script come to life and make an episode really stick with its viewers. I did a poll on my Facebook page asking my followers which story and director I should focus on first. The choices were Dalek by Joe Ahern, Doomsday by Graham Harper, The End of Time by A. Ross Lynn, or Heaven Sent by Rachel Talalay, and the overwhelming winner was Heaven Sent.
I'm not scared of hell, it's just heaven for bad people.
I think the reason for that is that Heaven Sent is not a conventional episode. As visually striking as some episodes can be, there is a limit when it comes to conversation sequences, and there are only so many over-the-shoulder cuts and wide shots of people talking across tables that you can talk about and make a video about. But with Heaven Sent, we essentially have a 55-minute monologue. Not only that, but it's a kinetic story with lots of rooms, settings, exposition, flashbacks, montages, and retracing of steps. It's completely unique to Doctor Who, and as a result, it's not filmed like a conventional Doctor Who episode. It's clearly an opportunity that Rachel Talalay leapt at, which is interesting because her previous work on Doctor Who was the two-parter Dark Water and Death in Heaven, which, when it comes to their direction, are fine. They're just fine. There's a couple of cool shots, but really the two-parter visually feels a little bit flat. There is no indication in this two-parter that we have our next future TV directing star behind the camera, and it's really with Heaven Sent that Rachel Talalay truly arrived on the programme. We also have our Director of Photography, or DOP as it's otherwise known as, someone who essentially works with the director to compose the shots, make sure the lighting's in the right place, and to work with the director to visually tell the story. For Heaven Sent we have Stuart Biddlecombe, who makes his Doctor Who debut here. He's mainly known for doing UK adult prestige dramas like Land Girls and Hinterland, and would later go on to work on Sherlock and Call the Midwife. Before Heaven Sent, he didn't have much genre TV experience, and Heaven Sent kind of comes across like one of the adult prestige dramas. It's darkly lit, it's atmospheric. So let's break down Heaven Sent, but before we get started, let me just qualify a couple of things. This video is not an analysis of the story's narrative. I won't be talking about the character, the plot, or mentioning any aspects of the story that don't quite add up, like plot holes or how the story was basically made irrelevant by Hell Bent. That was down to Steven Moffat, the writer. I am here to talk about the work that Rachel Talalay, Stuart Biddlecombe and other incidental figures along the way, the work that they did to bring out Moffat's work. That is what the production team do. Also, the format of this video was inspired by YouTuber Anime AJ, who does animation breakdowns on shows like Dragon Ball, Baruto and others. If you're into anime, animation or just media related content done by British people, check him out. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below. So here we go, with all of that out of the way, here is Heaven Sent, shot by shot. The episode opens with ominous, foreboding Peter Capaldi narration as we get some atmospheric cutaways of the cylindrical castle inside the Doctor's confession dial. On high-budget TV shows or movies, shots like this would normally be done by a second unit team, a splinter group of a film crew, whose job it is to get simple shots without any of the principal cast involved, whether it be cutaways or establishing shots outside of buildings, or shots of just people walking around as transition shots or time-lapses, etc. However, with a lower budget show like Doctor Who, things like this probably have to be scheduled in with the main filming block. So don't be surprised if Rachel Talalay and Stuart Biddlecombe were responsible for these shots as well as the main brunt of the episode, which is the scenes with Peter Capaldi. And these shots aren't just still images either, many of them have a gradual tilt or a twist applied to them, almost as if the castle is turning and twisting, a nice subtle hint considering the way the castle later revolves and resets in order to unlock passages further into it. It's when the Doctor arrives at the transmat do we start to see Rachel Talalay already put the camera to work, with small moments like the shot following the Doctor's hand scooping up the dust at his feet. This is a rather small and simple set, all things considered, so centering the camera at Capaldi's movement and then using a slow handheld zoom, going from a full body shot to a close-up of his face bringing us into the opening titles, was an incredibly smart play. Already, before we've properly left this room and started the episode, do we know that Heaven Sent, from a directorial standpoint, is going to be something special. We also have the really novel approach of only having Peter Capaldi's name in the opening credits, further demonstrating the loss of Clara and putting that loss in the audience's minds, but more on that later. After the titles, we get some shots that we actually don't see that often in Doctor Who, and that's point of view shots as the Doctor looks out of a nearby window. Simple in concept and execution, but with this being a story with one character, it makes a lot of sense to give the audience a window into what this character sees, and we don't actually see that many POV shots in Doctor Who, especially from the Doctor's perspective. Now it may seem like I'm sweating the small stuff here, but when the Doctor picks up the spade, the camera breaks convention in this scene. We go from a handheld shot in front of a walking Doctor to a handheld shot from his back over his shoulder to emphasise the spade. This immediately gives the audience a subliminal heads up that it's important since the cut and the angle change is so drastic. But this cutaway is a shot that we will see repeated over and over again later on down the line, so it is a shot that needed to exist for the edit to work later on down the line. We further see the handheld camera get put to great use as we get our first tease of the Veil, our pseudo-villain of the story. It's an extreme wide shot with a slightly shaky camera, so we don't quite get a good look at it before it calmly moves out of sight. Everything surrounding the Veil's introduction is steeped in classic horror and is built around throwing the Doctor off balance. But because this episode is all about the Doctor's state of mind, the audience also has to be thrown off balance, and that is personified by this cut. First we have a close-up of the Doctor looking off screen, and we cut to a shot of the shadow of the Veil coming around the corner. Due to the curvature of the room, it's easy to assume that this is just another point of view shot, especially since point of view shots have already been an established tool for this episode just moments ago, but it's swiftly revealed to not be a POV as the camera pans quickly to the left to reveal a wide shot of the Doctor. The audience, even for a moment, is thrown off balance ever so slightly here to disorientate them, which is so fitting considering the emotional significance of the Veil to the Doctor, a literal nightmare from his childhood that is designed to force him to confess his deepest secrets. We think it's a POV, surprise, it turns out to be a pan. The change from a cylindrical corridor to the narrow straight one is demonstrated in a single seamless transition, and the next sequence uses reliable camera tricks to give a sense of dread, with close-ups of the Doctor with the Veil slowly getting closer behind him, the use of focus changing from the victim to the pursuer. All well done stuff. We get a nice reprieve from the horror as the Doctor enters the castle bedroom, with most of the camera work quite rightly dedicated to capturing Capaldi's performance upon seeing the painting of Clara. Sometimes as a director it can be so easy to just have flashy shots, spinning cameras and quick editing in order to just show off, but restraint can be one of the best tools in a director's kit. For example, when you don't want your direction to overshadow the actor's performance. Director A. Ross Lynn was great at this in episodes like The End of the World and The End of Time, and despite the striking imagery and effective editing in Heaven Sent, it's great to see that Rachel Talalay understands this principle as well. This approach also crosses over into horror, as when Capaldi leans forward, the camera changes focus to one of the monitors in the background, alerting the audience to the Veil closing in, unbeknownst to the Doctor. The Doctor throwing the stool out of the bedroom window in glorious slow motion also brings us to a very heroic smash cut of the Doctor entering his TARDIS mind palace. A smash cut is usually included in the episode script in order to almost literally smash or crash into the next scene and grab the audience's attention, and this life or death situation the Doctor finds himself in kind of demands your attention as we now find ourselves in the TARDIS. There's not too much to mention here that is unique to Talalay, as Capaldi's Doctor and this TARDIS always felt very suited as he bandies about this space. However, there is a lovely transition from the Doctor's eye as he falls to his eye as he recounts his survival in the TARDIS, plus a lovely moment where the Doctor breaks the fourth wall to look directly at the audience, which was scripted by Steven Moffat.
And I'm going to explain to you how I survived. Can't wait to hear what I say. I'm nothing without an audience.
It's with this quick cutting of flashbacks with the Doctor testing the gravity with the flower petals and the eyeglass, as well as the Doctor in his mind palace, do we really start to see the work of Will Oswald, a long-time editor of Doctor Who, whose work spans dozens of episodes, as well as work on Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. And while I really do not like the plane sound effect as the camera zooms towards the TARDIS screens, the rest of this sequence is really great stuff and is a nice taste of what's to come later. It may also be a blatant rip-off of Steven Moffat's own work on Sherlock, but in Heaven Sent, it's still an effective narrative device. We get a great blackout as the Doctor hits the water, and I love how the TARDIS lighting up to represent him regaining consciousness is teased at with this single light over Capaldi's shoulder before we cut to a wider shot showing the rest of the machine slowly whirring back to life. The shot of the thousands of skulls in the water is also a wonderfully macabre image. That's followed by a nice edit as the Doctor exits the water towards the top of the frame before cutting to a shot of the surface with no Doctor, who then enters the frame from the bottom. Then the Doctor's eyes point upwards and we get an aerial view of the castle. It gives these two cuts a nice sense of upward momentum as we do move upwards with the camera and also the setting. We get some snappy cuts as the Doctor changes his outfit, and much like the camera shot dedicated to the spade earlier, we get two shots dedicated to the Doctor putting things back exactly as he found them, and then pondering the situation, giving the audience a nice little moment to piece together what is happening in their heads at the same time as the Doctor. We then cut to a lovely dolly shot, a shot where the camera is able to get a smooth pan by being put on a set of tracks and then wheeled. With a room this big, it deserves a dolly track just to give a sense of how vast this space is, emphasised by the low angle. As the Doctor in the next room tries to determine what is chasing him and why, we get some tilted Dutch angles, drastic cuts from close-ups to wide as the Doctor goes through his thought process, culminating in the Doctor literally turning from facing screen right to screen left as he moves on, a physical move to the next level after he solved imaginary Clara's questions. The questions in this scene are directed to the right of the screen, but the Doctor actually finds those answers on the left.
I think it's a political statement.
As the Doctor moves down the corridor towards the garden, it was a smart move from the set team to put those illuminated gears on that back wall. Without the light giving the Doctor an outline, Capaldi could easily have gotten obscured within his own frame due to the dark lighting and his own dark outfit, but the garden itself really looks like a cool Hammer horror outdoor set. There's mist, dying foliage, and with that slamming door, it feels like the Doctor has stepped into a Crystal Maze set, but in a good way. This room is just another puzzle that needs solving.
Come on, Leon.
That's right. Foggy Bog. Okay, your time
I see where the crystal.
starts
I
now.
can see the crystal in front of me.
Okay, you know what you're doing.
So just go get the crystal.
What does the sign say?
So read the sign,
What does the sign say?
Leon.
Slide the planks to create a path to the crystal.
Okay, so slide this one. The one behind you. Slide in front of you. No, the behind you.
Right behind you, the one that you came
behind
in.
you.
Leon,
That one
behind
does
you.
not move. The one behind you does not move.
Doesn't move, sorry.
This one here to your left.
There you go.
It's the only one that doesn't.
Yeah, so yeah.
And then put that right in front of...
Do you know what you're doing?
Yeah, sideways, yes. Yeah.
We get a cool and clever edit with the Doctor saying he has an hour to dig before the veil comes back, cut to black which then turns out to be a tracking shot from behind a nearby wall, looking through a barred window and the hole is already deeply dug. A simple edit, but it communicates plenty. This one shot is also one of the best shots of the entire episode, as the camera continues to pan to show that same corridor the Doctor entered the garden from, you can tell it's the same because of those gears in the background, before showing the screen that shows the veil's POV, and that it's actually in the same room the Doctor Doctor debated its motives, it's not very far away, and those wide shots of Capaldi in that room now seem very important in hindsight, so audiences could recognise that room later on the monitors. After a brief scuffle with the veil, the Doctor goes back to digging, and this time the time-lapse is much more subtle as the mist starts to turn into a sunset orangey colour. However, since this is the second time the audience has seen a time skip involving digging, this subtle change feels more earned. The audience has kind of acclimatised to this sort of transition. A precedent has been set in the viewer's mind, much like the POV to pan cheats that we saw earlier. The next prominent Mind Palace scene feels similar to earlier, except it ends on what could be the widest shot of this TARDIS set that we have ever seen. A lonely Doctor talking to an imaginary version of his recently deceased companion, trapped in a torture chamber, forced to admit truths he does not want to tell. Capaldi's otherwise bombastic, heroic Doctor, who originally entered the space in a heroic low-angle close-up, allowing him to dominate the frame, is so tiny in the frame here, and isolated, and placing him on those back stairs to put him even further in the background and away from the camera, and he's facing away from the camera now, gives us a nice visual into how he feels right now. It might be my favourite TARDIS shot from this episode. The next few minutes are essentially an exposition dump, with the rooms changing around, the Doctor trying to find room 12, finding out how long it will take for the veil to find him from one end of the castle to the other, reminding the audience about the skulls in the water, establishing the resetting rooms. Thankfully, Capaldi's narration and some great cinematography prevent it from feeling like a second act lull. I especially love this forward panning shot over the dining table, probably with a combination of a crane on top of a dolly on a set of tracks at the other end of the table. The Doctor then decides to travel back to the transmat room where his journey here started, and that is depicted from the framing of this shot, as you can see the Doctor through the glass in the centre of the room, making it appear as if the Doctor is back inside that tube. It gives the audience a little reminder of how the Doctor got here, and that this is indeed the first room, and also kind of hints that he's going to be back in that tube later on. The transition from the Doctor's face to the skull he places on the ledge of the tower might give the game away as to what's happening a little bit too early, but it's nicely done all the same. It seems very Shakespearean, you know, alas poor Yorick, except it's an angry Scottish guy. Okay, so it's Macbeth. What's also nicely done is the reveal of the veil behind the Doctor again. It's played very differently here. The audience and the Doctor should be well trained by now in picking up the cues. The flies buzzing, the ominous music. This reveal is played as a horror moment, but all of the players involved know that it's there. The Doctor teases a confession without turning around to face it, so he clearly knows that the veil is behind him. It's a nice moment where the audience and the Doctor are on the same intellectual level, and it's visually framed as a power play by the Doctor. Compare that to the scene in the bedroom where the audience knew the veil was closing in on the Doctor, but the Doctor didn't. Visually, Talalay and Stuart Biddlecombe are taking the audience for a ride. But the confession gets the Doctor into room 12, and this is where some of the most striking imagery of the episode comes into play. Through a combination of the set design and the wonderful use of lighting and silhouette, we see the Doctor slowly walk towards the diamond wall in the background, hands ticking with every second that passes, a true lord of time. This stunning tableau with Capaldi centre of the frame, the corridors giving the audience a pseudo-triangle to focus their eyes on at the point of intersection in the centre. You could literally frame this shot as a piece of art. If I had to nitpick one shot in this gorgeous sequence, it's this shot. Not necessarily the way it's framed or lit or anything really, but the fact that the cut comes with an abrupt camera angle change, not to mention that all of the other shots in this scene seem to take place with the camera placed on the other side of the room. This shot breaks the 180 rule and disorientates the viewer for no real reason, to be honest. The 180 rule is that there should be one side, a fourth wall of the set that the camera should ideally not cross, otherwise you'll be mixing up the eye lines and the shoulders of the actors who are in the scene, and you can throw off the placement of those characters to the viewer. Now you can break the 180 rule with purpose, like if you want to confuse the audience or throw them off balance, but this sequence is all about revelations and reveals and truths, and the camera placement should be all about clarity, and this angle from this side of the room actually goes against that. It's a complete nitpick and only people like me will care, but I've got to be critical in some respects, but I want to be fair and I want to give my reasonings. But yeah, that's a nitpick. The orange lighting with the black featureless walls easily depict a single very clear end goal, and then we come to the granddaddy of shots, the push-pull focus reveal as the bombshell bird moment drops and hits the Doctor like a diamond brick.
bad.
A push-pull shot is achieved by physically moving the camera closer to the subject while simultaneously zooming out, leaving the subject the same size in the frame but distorting and changing the background. It was a shot popularised by Alfred Hitchcock in Vertigo to give the lead character a sense of, well, vertigo, but it has also been used by Steven Spielberg in Jaws and most recently by James Gunn in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 to depict a huge revelation internally within the lead character, or at least the subject in the shot. It's a moment where the character's resolve and worldview completely changes. But what's interesting about the way Talalay uses this shot is that she actually makes the moment land even harder than Hitchcock, than Spielberg, by Gunn, by not letting the audience know that it's that kind of shot until the revelatory moment, until the frame is already distorting. In the previous examples, that 3 or 4 second push-pull shot is all about that push-pull shot. The first frame of those shots is the camera moving and the last frame is when they settle. In Heaven Sent, the first frame has Capaldi with his back to the camera. He turns around, hits his mark, says his line, and then Talalay moves the camera. It's such a minor addition, but firstly, it demonstrates massive balls, but it also makes that bird revelation feel earth-shattering. I love this shot as well of a defeated Doctor lumped against the diamond wall, and the personification of death in the foreground literally eats him up in the frame as he considers death in this moment. There's this lovely slightly out of focus POV shot in the Doctor's TARDIS of the chalkboard before cutting away to reveal the Doctor's teary eyes, almost as if that POV was obscured and made fuzzy by tears. The empty space in the left of frame, reserved for a companion who's no longer there, gives the Doctor a heartbreaking sense of loneliness in these brief shots before Clara's hand comes in and we pan over to reveal Jenna Coleman's face, seen for the first time in this episode to comfort him. She also leaves the episode the same way she entered, and the camera does the exact same movement but in reverse, selling the idea that she is a fantasy who does not exist outside of these singular shots. Later on in the TARDIS with the Doctor on the brink of death, I love this shot of the Doctor standing behind the central column with a distorted face. After the scalding injuries he's received in real life, it's appropriate to depict this fantasy version of him almost with a kind of deformity by using the glass in the foreground. Using warped glass is something that cinematographer Stuart Biddlecombe used to great effect in Hinterland, but here it's even more pronounced. The central column even illuminates when he realises what is going on, a literal light bulb moment. This is also a really cleverly framed shot of the Doctor climbing up the spiral staircase. He's using all of his effort to climb them, but he's only in the bottom right of the frame with so much space yet to travel. You've also got some effective close-ups of Capaldi on the TARDIS floor as he talks to the audience through his own death and recycling. After a few alternative takes and angles of the opening scene of the episode, we now have the superb montage done by editor William Oswald, who uses all of the important shots and cutaways to depict the billions of years the Doctor spends inside the dial, and all of this works because the episode, through Rachel Talalay's direction and Oswald's prior editing and Steven Moffat's writing, have laid the groundwork for how these time skips work, from digging up the grave to the Doctor laying out his plan to him even stating how much time it takes to do all of the work, not to mention the past 45 minutes of being in the Doctor's shoes through POVs, narration, editing techniques. It means the audience does some of the heavy lifting here. They have watched the Doctor struggle for 45 minutes and they've been on that struggle with him. Now they just have to imagine the Doctor doing that a billion more times. 7,000 years, 12,000 years, 600,000 years, 2 million years, 20 million, 52 million. You'll be surprised at how well the Doctor just saying how long he's been here for does for the audience's state of mind. Almost all of the shots in the montage are identical to what we've seen before, with the exception of the Doctor getting further through the diamond wall, telling more of the Brothers Grimm story. As he gets further and further, the light of the room gets brighter, a subtle tell that he's getting nearer to the end, until, after billions of years, he has literally brute forced his way through his grief and is consumed by a white light, crossing a threshold before stepping into a scorched desert, a huge contrast to the grey stone of the castle, and it's revealed to be Gallifrey. And to be honest, this is actually maybe the least interesting part of the episode to talk about from a visual directorial standpoint, to be honest, though I do like the wide panning shot going from the running child to the city of Gallifrey. And credits. That's the episode. I just wrote over 3,000 words just talking about the direction of a single episode of television, of Doctor Who no less, but there's just so much going on here, and it's clear that Heaven Sent really is something special in the history of the programme, from the way that Rachel Talalay breaks series conventions and puts us in the Doctor's mindset, from using traditional static and handheld shots as well as more sophisticated rigs to achieve different goals, as well as clever framing, superb lighting, camera moves that tell a story in and of themselves, etc, etc. And you know what, just for fun, let me talk about the top 10 shots, or my top 10 shots, of this episode. Number 10, the wide shot of the Doctor re-entering the first room. Number 9, the extreme wide shot of the Doctor swimming above the seabed of skulls. Number 8, the medium close-up shot of Clara entering and leaving the frame through the same means. It's 2 shots, but I'll count it as 1. Number 7, the wide shot of the Doctor crawling up the staircase. Number 6, this medium shot of the Doctor distorted by the TARDIS console, which then illuminates in front of him. Number 5, the wide panning shot going from the Doctor digging to the POV monitor of the Veil. Number 4, the extreme wide shot of the Doctor alone in the TARDIS. Number 3, the wide quick pan early on, which we thought was a POV at first. Number 2, the extreme wide of the Doctor silhouetted in front of the diamond wall. And number 1, the push-pull reveal moment. But what about you folks? I hope you enjoyed this shot-by-shot analysis of Heaven Sent. I hope you maybe learned a few cinematography techniques that you might want to try out for yourself, or maybe at the very least you've gained more understanding in how a director has to bring a script to life, and also kind of what I see when I watch a TV show. What's your favourite shot of this episode? Also, what other episodes and directors would you like me to talk about in potential future episodes? I had a real blast making this video, which is kind of a pseudo test pilot, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If you'd like to see more, then please hit that like button, and if you didn't like it, then please leave constructive feedback at least, and also subscribe for more Doctor Who and TV and media analysis. I'll see you guys next time. And no, I'm not doing Hellbent. Hellbent is really bad. And once again, a big shout out to all of my patrons whose names you are seeing on the screen right now, with a special mention for Anne Neubauer, Dean Jones, Luna Day, and Paul Warbeck. If you'd like to get these videos early, as well as get behind the scenes access and also see your name in the credits, visit www.patreon.com/Trilby. Thank you.